All right, everybody, here we are with part two of the Alabama versus Clemson National Championship game preview. Today, I'm going to talk about the offensive stats of both teams. Just going to jump right into it. I'm going to save the points per game for last because I think that is actually one of the more interesting things I noticed about these two teams as I was studying them. So, starting with Alabama, they're number 31 in total offense. 990 plays ran this year for 6,453 yards. Now, that comes out to 6.52 yards per play with 55 offensive touchdowns, 460.9 yards per game. Clemson, on the other hand, as you would expect, will have a higher total offense on the season. They're number 12. Here's the reason why. I mean, they ran 31 more plays, 1,121 plays, but for a little bit more yardage, 7,044 yards, so about 600 more yards than Alabama. That's about 6.28 yards per play, 70 offensive touchdowns, 503 yards per game. So, averaging about 43 more yards per game than Alabama. And that really that shows you, why they have a higher ranking. They've gotten a few more yards here and there, mainly from their passing game. And you're going to see that now when I talk about the rushing stats. Alabama, on the other hand, has number 11 rushing offense in the nation. Number 11, 605 rushing attempts for 3,454 yards, 5.7 yards per carry, 30 rushing touchdowns. Alabama definitely a ground-dependent team, run the ball way more often, and you can see that this year with Jalen Hurts having 891 rushing yards. Bo Scarborough having 719 rushing yards, even though he didn't start getting more carries until the end of the season. Damian Harris, who only had 140 attempts with 1,000 rushing yards on the season. Joshua Jacobs, close to 500 rushing yards. And B.J. Emmons, before he was dealing with a bit of an injury problem, was also starting to pick up steam toward the end of the year. So Alabama was running the ball quite a bit, and that's important to know because, a lot of Alabama fans, would get on Lane Kiffin about how many times he was running the ball. Well, in reality, we actually did run the ball significantly more. We did this year than we passed it. I guess a lot of people were talking about, the specific plays called for running or situations when we felt like we should have run. But the thing is, you do have to remain balanced. But he has called, when I get to it, you'll see 605 rushing attempts to about 350 passing attempts. And that's something you have to keep in mind. Clemson, on the other hand, has the number 62 rushing offense, and that's even with the 1,000-yard rushers because they didn't run the ball as much as effectively as last year. Number 62 nation had 549 rushing attempts this year. I think 2,455 rushing yards for an average of 4.47 yards. Again, 4.5 yards. So about a full yard less average per carry than Alabama. 28 rushing touchdowns. So they got the touchdowns out of it, but they didn't really churn out yards like Alabama did. Alabama basically had about 1,000 more yards rushing this season. So put that in perspective, about 1,000 more yards rushing this season than Clemson. A lot of big plays running the ball, a lot of runs that went for a lot of yards. The Bo Scarborough 85-yard run comes to mind. The Damian Harris long run against USC comes to mind. There's been a lot of big plays made out of the Alabama running game, whereas Clemson has not had as many. Moving on to the passing offense, Clemson has the number 7 passing offense in the nation, which would be expected with Deshaun Watson having the year that he's had, being a Heisman finalist. He has thrown 523 passes this year. So they've been had a lot of balance this year, actually. About northwards of 550 passing attempts and rushing attempts total as a team, but Deshaun Watson has 523 passing attempts, and he has completed 352 of those passes for 4,173 yards. And on 67 completion percentage, which is really, really good. And you'll see why I'm going to talk about it a little bit after I talk about Jalen Hurts. On 8 yards per attempt, which is also still pretty decent. 38 touchdowns 12 yards per completion, like I said, which is really good. The one issue he's had passing the ball that many times, attacking down the field just a little bit more, is that he's thrown 17 interceptions this season. He already had 15 interceptions going into the game before Ohio State. People forget, they talk about how good the game he had against Ohio State, but he actually threw 2 interceptions in that game against Ohio State. And so he's basically averaging a little bit over 1 interception per game this year. Because I think due to his mechanics and sometimes just the fact that he's throwing the ball down the field a little bit more and where he's trying to fit the ball into his ball placement, it leads to interceptions from the other team's DBs and guys who ran away. You saw that in the first pass he had in the Ohio State game. He didn't really throw the ball where it needed to be. But the receiver slip. But his second interception really showed it as he really overthrew the guy, and Malik Hooker had to get caught up to the ball and got the interception. Now, Jalen Hurts, on the other hand, Alabama has the number 81 passing offense in the nation, so a big discrepancy there, which is no surprise if you're an Alabama fan because you watch this team, you know we've been more ground heavy, more ground dependent. He's thrown 351 passes this season. He's attempted 351. He's completed 227 of those passes for 2,649 yards. 7.55 yards per attempt on 11.7 yards per completion. 65% completion rate, or 64.7 if you want to be exact. 22 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, so 8 less interceptions than Deshaun Watson in the same amount of games, though he does have 16 less touchdowns. But that's because he's taking care of the ball. He's been tasked with taking care of the ball and not necessarily trying to sling the ball around the field. Now, one thing you'll notice is that both of these guys are throwing about 65% and higher. That's really, really good, especially for the amount of passes that they threw. To give you a little context of why that's good, take Trevor Knight, who plays for Texas A&M. He's thrown probably a lot of passes too, but I didn't even have the chance to look up his stats. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's only completing, or was at that point in the season, only completing 52% of his passes when Alabama played them. And what that tells you is that he throws a lot of passes. Gunslinger, throwing a lot of passes, but he's only completing about half of the passes he's throwing. The rest of them are maybe being intercepted or just landing into the ground and not getting to the receiver. Defensive backs are making plays on the ball because he's not throwing the ball as accurate as he needs to, because of his mechanics, because of his footwork. And the ones that he does hit, they're the passes that he did get good grip on, did throw well, and that receiver did make a great play for. Probably passes that are going down the field and making a little bit more yards. So while he may have had, some statistics to say, oh, he had an okay season, he wasn't efficient with the ball. And then that's why they were ineffective against Alabama. If your quarterback's not efficient, you're not going to win, and that showed up. Alabama won that game 33-14. You need to be able to hit more passes than 50% of your passes, which Jalen Hurts and Deshaun Watson have done a great job of all season. Deshaun Watson just has thrown more passes than Jalen Hurts, and he's still been efficient. So that shows you how good of a guy he is. Now, the interesting thing is that Jalen Hurts' yards per attempt are not that far away from Deshaun Watson's yards per attempt. Like, remember, I said Deshaun Watson had 8 yards per attempt. Jalen Hurts had 7.5 yards per attempt. That tells me that they aren't really that far away in terms of how they're attacking, with their passing offense. They're throwing a lot of similar patterns, and that shows up in their per completion rate too. Jalen Hurts has 11.7 yards per completion. Deshaun Watson has 12 yards per completion. And when you add that up, you see that they both take a lot of short passes. A lot of people get on Lane Kiffin in Alabama for throwing, screen passes, short routes, stick routes, all those things, keeping the ball safe, throwing smaller routes so that, you can protect the quarterback. Clemson's offense is also a spread-type system. Alabama's have that mix of pro style and a little bit of spread elements. Clemson runs more spread-type, so they're running a lot of swing routes, which is what I talked about in that Fiesta Bowl game. Swing routes, wide receiver screens, shorter routes to get their receivers in space and get them the ball and to make plays. Now you may wonder, so why does Deshaun Watson's stats go so much higher than Jalen's? Because he does go down the field a little bit more, and they have thrown more passes. He has completed more passes. They do go down the field just a little bit more, and he hits on them. Jalen Hurts' biggest issue this year is that when he's going down the field, he hasn't always been consistent enough to hit his receivers when they do. Like, oh, Jalen, you should put a little bit more air on that. Or Jalen, You could have taken a little bit of arm strength off of that so you can hit your guy where you need to hit him. The ball placement could have been a little bit better down the field, but he's completed all the passes that they asked him to make. He hasn't messed up on the screens. He hasn't messed up on the stick routes. He hasn't messed up on the intermediate routes for the most part. and that explains why his completion percentage is high. Deshaun Watson, on the other hand, is hitting his passes short with good accuracy, short and medium range. And he also more consistently has hit the deep shots better than Jalen this year. Which is explaining why they have so many more passing yards, 4,000 compared to 2,600 for Alabama. And he hasn't been perfect on that. Like I said, 17 interceptions. He tends to have a little ball placement issues sometimes, which leads to the ball being intercepted, or he maybe misses guy down the field. But he does hit it more consistently than Jalen Hurts, which is what you would expect from a junior who was a Heisman finalist, rather than a true freshman who just starting college football this year. Now, you would think that because Clemson has this more explosive passing offense and whatnot, and a running game that's not too bad, even though they're number 62, and with 1,000-yard rusher, you would think, oh, well, Clemson is, scoring more points than Alabama. They're probably, blowing them out the water in terms of points scored. Not so fast. Clemson has 39.5 points per game. And you're going to take a guess at how many Alabama has. 39.5 points per game. More specifically, or exactly, Clemson has 39.5 points per game. Alabama has 39.4 points per game. And the reason why is because Alabama's total team touchdowns and points scored match up really well with how many points Clemson's offense has scored. And that tells me that Clemson's the rest of their team doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. Clemson, remember I told you, Clemson has 70 offensive touchdowns on the season. Alabama has 55 offensive touchdowns on the season. But Clemson has 73 total touchdowns, meaning that only 3 other touchdowns came from the other parts of the team, defense and special teams. Alabama, on the other hand, has had 70 total touchdowns, meaning that we had 15 other touchdowns coming from the other aspects of the team, defense, special teams. And that's added up in the fact, even in the field goals, too. Alabama has made 21 field goals this year. We've made 7 more field goals than Clemson. Clemson has only made 14. Clemson only has 2 defensive touchdowns, or I think 2 interceptions returned for a touchdown. I don't know if that third touchdown is a special teams touchdown, maybe like a kickoff return, or maybe a fumble return. Who knows? But Alabama has 11 defensive touchdowns and 4, I think, special teams touchdowns as well. So it's been, when you add all that up together, you see Alabama has more of a team effort going for how they're scoring their points and winning the games, while Clemson is very offensively focused in terms of how they're scoring their points. But it comes out to about the same thing. They're both averaging about 40 points per game. So they're both getting the job done, just in different ways. Alabama running the ball a bit more, not attacking so much with passing offense. Clemson attacking with their passing offense a little bit more, a little bit of run, and really relying on that. What it comes down to is that Alabama has scored 551 total points on the season. Clemson has scored 553. So they're just getting the job done in different ways. And I think that's important to note when this game works out, because you see Alabama's really showing off their completeness as a team. I'm not saying that Clemson doesn't have it, but you can see it in how they score. And that was actually the difference in the game last year. Alabama didn't get lucky on special teams plays and whatnot. That all worked together. Adam Griffith made his field goal in that game. Adam Griffith executed the onside kick well in that game. Eddie Jackson intercepted Deshaun Watson in that game and, influencing the scoreboard. Kenyon Drake returned the kickoff for a touchdown, along with Derrick Henry having 3 touchdowns and Jay Coker throwing a couple touchdowns to O.J. Howard. When you add all that together, there's a complete team effort, as opposed to just having Deshaun Watson having a great game by himself in that game, because Wayne Gallman was nowhere to be found because the run defense was so good. But Deshaun Watson really had to shoulder and carry that team. And to be honest, they almost did it with him doing that. But the overall team's completeness of Alabama won that game. And so that's something that you have to keep in mind. You can't just look at offensive stats. You can't just look at offensive ability, because that doesn't win you games. You need a whole team. And so that'll be interesting to see. And that's why I want to do this offensive stats video, so you can see this matchup. So Alabama, at the end of the day, has a better run offense. Clemson has a better pass offense, but they both score about the same amount of points per game. So, thanks for listening. See you in the next video. I'm going to try to get a little bit more Clemson footage and whatnot going on. Be on the lookout for that. Thanks for paying attention, guys.